Education Coordinator at the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center. In East Hampton, we're a national landmark located 100 miles east of New York City. And because we are doing work in the lot, the parking lot at the house, and it was hazardous, we have switched this only to a virtual program tonight. So therefore, I'm in my home with my painting behind us. We have two amazing guest speakers with us today. We're going to cover the topic financial fitness for artists. And we have Carol Steinberg, who is an intellectual property lawyer. And we have Renée Vara, who is an Vara, sorry, who's an art consultant. And also I made some new friends, so that's good too. So the way we're going to run the program is that Carol is going to present first, and then Renée will present for approximately 20 to 30 minutes each. And then after the presentations, we will take questions. So hold your questions until the end. I have my paper ready. As you know, I'm an artist as well. And I know this is really going to be informative. So I want to write things down, special things I want to remember. And this is recorded as well. Okay. Okay. So I'd like to introduce first Carol Steinberg. Carol is an intellectual property attorney and professor at School of Visual Arts in New York. Carol will describe a law that protects artists' work and proceeds when their work is in galleries. She's going to explain why registration is important in enforcing copyrights. She will also explain important provisions that should be included in an artist's contract with a gallery. So let's all welcome virtually Carol. Thank you so much. And I am going to set this up so Carol is spotlighted here. And I am going to.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I think it's very admirable. I know there are lots of interesting things you can be doing, and I applaud you for taking care of your art business. I just came from a class. I teach at the School of Visual Arts where students take a whole course, and I often meet people who say, I wish I knew more about how to protect my business. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 different tools that you can use. So the first, I'm going to talk to you about this law that protects you when your work is in a gallery, even if you don't have a contract, where the gallery has a special obligation to you, some provisions that should be in a contract if your work is in a gallery, and then registration and why it matters. And you've probably heard me talk a lot about that, but it matters, and I'll tell you why. So let's get started. So let's say, I had a situation actually where I was in a gallery in New York City, in Soho, and I said to the artist, I just bought a print of yours, a work on paper. I love it so much. And he said, I didn't know it was sold. So the art dealer had not told him that the work was sold. I don't know if he had a contract with the gallery or not, but he had an issue. So what if he said to the dealer, you owe me money, you sold my painting, you sold my artwork, and the dealer says, which they often do, well, you show art at your own risk. So what can you do? Oops. Okay, so this is New York state law, but many states have the same law. And it's called a remedial statute because there's a situation where people are treated unfairly and they don't have the bargaining power that the dealers may have. So they passed a law that protected artists when they deliver artwork to what's called an art merchant. That would be an art dealer. And this automatically, the law says that when you deliver your artwork to the dealer, that dealer has to hold your work in trust. It's trust property. They can't use the proceeds from the sales to pay their rent. They can't commingle the money that's yours with their money. But this law could be waived, which means you could sign your rights away. And lots of people do that when they don't know what they're signing or they don't necessarily have bargaining power. So it sounded good, this law, but there was a problem. There was no way to enforce it. There were no real penalties if the galleries actually used the monies for their own expenses. And artists not having a lot of bargaining power meant that they often would have to give up their rights. Very expensive to bring a lawsuit. So You may remember Lawrence Salander was an art dealer who had a gallery on the Upper East Side. And he loved to show traditional art. He didn't like contemporary art. He loved traditional art. And so he had a lot of artwork to sell. As it turns out, there was an $88 million fraud. You see him here being carried away to prison. He didn't like the fact that Warhol painting sold for more than a Rembrandt. And he had a fancy Upper East Side gallery that with a very high rent. So this was kind of a sarcastic statement, but a Manhattan DA described his fraud like, why sell a painting once when you could sell it 3 times? So he would sell a part of a painting to various wealthy collectors. So he would sell half of a painting to John McEnroe, half of a painting to somebody else, another half to somebody else, another half to somebody else. We've already got more halves than the whole painting has. So you kind of get the idea. He sold more than he had. So John McEnroe was one of the people who sued. He'd invested $2 million that he didn't get back. Stuart Davis' son tried to get money because Salander showed Stuart Davis paintings. He didn't get any money back. So Salander filed for bankruptcy. And often when you file for bankruptcy, you can get rid of a lot of your debts. And unfortunately, that defeated a lot of the claims. But as it turns out in the lawsuit, he lost. He messed up. So he ended up pleading guilty to 29 felony counts and 6 to 18 years in prison. So lots of artists filed claims under this law I just told you about. But
Why that's happening. Hang on, everybody. It's for some reason this presentation is stuck. Oh, what the?
oh,
It's
okay.
unstuck.
They had a lot of issues. They didn't get their money. So the Art Law Committee of the City Bar Association, which I'm a member of, got a new law passed that was improved law. So the new law says, again, when you are an artist, this doesn't apply to collectors, artists, or you're an artist estate. If you consign work to a gallery, you take work to a gallery for them to sell it, your work, it's called trust property. It cannot become the property of the dealer, and it can't become part of a bankruptcy estate. For example, they can't file for bankruptcy and use your artwork as collateral. They can't use your artwork to pay the rent. The artwork has to be taken special care of. The law can't be waived, except there are some exceptions. If it's really, really clear and conspicuous, and you know what you're signing, you might be able to give up the rights in the law, but not the first $2,500. And I would say don't ever sign a waiver unless you know what you're signing. You don't have to. So they have to keep the proceeds from your sales separate. And if they don't, there are criminal penalties. So the law got some teeth. So now a breach of this, if say the dealer keeps your money or keeps your artwork and doesn't give it back to you or closes up and disappears, they can be liable for a criminal act, a misdemeanor. And you can go to court without a lawyer and you can sue, and you can even get your attorney's fees if you're successful. So the law is much stronger. The dealer has to prove that they didn't steal your work, but the artist has to prove that they delivered the work. And we're going to come to that again later. Like, you have to have proof that you gave work to an art dealer. I have a client who actually used this law because an art dealer whose name I'm not going to mention, you may all know, said, oh, you must have forgotten this 13 pieces of art. I gave them back to you. You must have forgotten. He had not given them back to her, but she, of course, had to show that she gave the work to him. She needed to have a piece of paper, at least that showed she gave this work to this dealer. So the artist has to prove delivery of the work and demand the work back. And then the dealer has to prove that it did something with the work, or it doesn't owe the money, or the dealer has to make the case. So the term, it's just a great term to know that you could throw around, fiduciary obligation. And that's a legal word that means a high obligation, a special obligation. If any of you are dealing with wills, or you ever dealt with a will, the person who's taking care of, the executor of the estate, has a fiduciary obligation, a special obligation to the person who passed away, because the person isn't there to take care of things. So they have what's called the special obligation. So the art dealer has a fiduciary obligation to you, the artist, to take care of your artwork and take care of the money from the sales of your work, because they get the money and it's your money. So use this term. It's a good one to throw around. So now, in addition to knowing this law, which actually really works, I have a client who came to me to say, I know that they sold my work. Actually, she was a photographer and she printed the works that were asked to be, that were sold, and the money didn't come back. So she actually quoted this law. She wrote a letter herself to the art dealer and she got money. So it's something you could really use, and it's really important to know. I mean, there are tons of dealers out here who are really nice, and many lovely art dealers, but we all know there are some who may take advantage. But let's be practical. Before you even deliver artwork, take it to a gallery. You got to know who you're dealing with. I can tell you legal stuff, but the most important thing is who's the gallery. Check them out. What's their reputation? Talk to other people who've shown there. What kind of clients do they have? What kind of market does it reach? Is it financially sound? See if you can find these things out. Get it in writing. I know that's not a large practice in the art world, but it makes a huge difference, because you're all excited, you have a deal, you deliver the work, you could have a nice show. But what happens if there's a problem? What happens if there's a fire? What happens if something horrible happens, which, as we know, could happen, a flood, pestilence, all kinds of things can happen. How do you know, how do you show that your work is there and what the deal was? It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be complicated. Get it in writing. Emails back and forth, that's writing, but not just he said, she said. So, you know how to negotiate. It's not easy for everyone at all, but you could just say, let's have a conversation about what we both expect. And that avoids misunderstandings. You could send an email with the things that you agreed to. For example, if you show at a gallery in Southampton, is that exclusive? Is that art dealer exclusive? Does that mean you can't show in New York City? If you have a New York City gallery, does that mean you can't have one in Los Angeles? You have to kind of work these things out. And you can always ask, like, well, what do you mean by this provision? Why do you need to have exclusivity over me? Are you going to show all over the world? You could just have a conversation. There are a few provisions that really should be in an agreement, a consignment agreement with an art dealer. The most important thing, as I said, is a list of the work. You've got to prove the work is there, and keep adding to it as you do. What's the term? Can they sell your work forever? Can they show your work forever? They may want to if you're really good, but you may want to move to another gallery. And lots of people have called me up saying, I can't get my work out of this gallery. I want to move to another one. They won't give it to me. If you have a term, 3 years, that is in writing, and it's hard to argue with that. You can always renew it. You can also always change it, but it's really important to have that. How you could terminate, maybe if you don't get paid, if you don't provide the artwork, you could talk about what the terms of termination might be. I mean, there are other things you could certainly put in, but those are the really most important ones. And you could put in things like you agree on what the sales will be. Certainly you want to agree on their commission, which is usually like 50%, but how much you're going to get and when you're going to get it. It's kind of common sense, like the things that really matter. And there, of course, there are other provisions that you could have. I have a situation going on now between New York and California, and I have a provision in this contract saying if there's a problem, we use New York law, because I don't want to go to LA to argue about something that's happening in New York, and my client doesn't want to have to go there in that case. But the first 3 or 4 there, those are really the most important ones. Okay, so specify the payment schedule. When are you going to get paid? Make sure it's close to the sale. Why do they need to keep your money? They've got what they get. What happens if the gallery doesn't get paid? When the artwork is transferred, title transfers, you don't want that work to go out until you've been paid. So you want to make sure you get paid no matter what, and it's the gallery's obligation to pay you. You'd like an account. You'd like to see what's sold and for how much and where your work is. So again, the term, start date, end date, you can always have an option to extend. What's the pricing going to be? You know, is it exclusive or non-exclusive? If they're going to be exclusive, are they really going to represent you all over the world? And then maybe if you show in Southampton, they don't want you to show in East Hampton, but does that mean you can't show in New York City? You want to have that discussion. We know art dealers who have galleries here and they have galleries in the city, so maybe they want to be exclusive, but there's got to be a good reason why, and you want to discuss that. Can they loan your work to other galleries? What happens then? Know who you're signing with for sure. Again, an inventory sheet with images so that you know and they know what you have and what they have. It's nice to talk about who bears the risk of loss. Like, it's really nice if a gallery has insurance and that you are covered, and you would like to know that they have it. So that's something you can really ask to see and talk about. What happens if the work is damaged, etc. I have actually seen once in a while a contract that says the gallery has the copyright. The gallery does not have the copyright, should never have the copyright, ever, ever, ever. The artist keeps the copyright. So if there's any reproductions to be made, it's up to the artist. I mean, many painters don't want copies made. They just want to sell their painting. They don't want, but whatever it is, the artist has the copyright and has the right to govern whatever happens to that work. And I've talked about copyright many times, and many of you have come, but if you don't know about copyright, please learn about it, because it really governs everything that you have. You have a whole bundle of rights that's just so important. It governs, you own all the rights in your work, and you don't want to give it away unless you want to or you get something for it. And on LTV, I talked about copyright and fair use, and you can find those tapes, I'm sure. There are other provisions that could go in. You could put in, say, for example, if you have a dispute, you'll mediate it. You won't go to court. How am I doing on time?
Right.
Oh, gosh. Okay. So now the last thing I want to talk about. 3 more minutes?
We have time. Okay.
Okay.
You have plenty of time.
The last thing I want to say, register your artwork. I know you've heard me talk about this before, a lot of you, and I just have, it really matters. This is a poster that this wonderful Karen Fredericks made of a talk that I gave last fall at LTV, that you can find the recording if you want to. But why does copyright matter? Okay, I have let's say someone calls me up and they say, I'm a painter. I saw copies of my work on Instagram and in this shitty store. What am I going to do? The first question I ask is, have you registered your copyright? Because if you have not, you can't really do very much. You can't go to court, and you can't get significant damages. So it's an important thing to know how to do. If you have registered your copyright, let's see what I put here. Well, here's an example, which happens a lot. This artist, Julian Rivera, saw this image that he created on t-shirts in Walmart, and they were selling like crazy. Yeah, there you go. In Ellen DeGeneres' clothing line. And he wrote to say, this is my image, but they ignored him. So what can he do? He registered his copyright. which you need to have to bring a lawsuit. A letter was written on his behalf, and they worked out a settlement. And because he registered, he probably got what he wanted. Having registered allows a court to award what's called statutory damages. Otherwise, you have to prove your lost profits, which can be very hard and very expensive to do. But if you've registered your copyright, a court can award up to $150,000 per infringement. Now, it's not a guarantee, and our next speaker is going to tell you about a case where, because of her, the court awarded $150,000 per infringement. But it really does make a big difference. Here's a recent case where this artist, he's a digital artist, an AI artist, Jason Allen, is trying to get his work registered with the Copyright Office, and they're giving him a hard time. And he said, my inability to register my artwork with the Copyright Office puts me in a terrible position with no recourse against others who are stealing my work. So it really does matter. Now, when it comes to AI, there are very special rules, which we could talk about, but it's a whole other subject. The Copyright Office is not going to register work created by AI, but they will register the human part of it. But the important thing is for you to know about registration. This is the work he's trying to register. He's suing because they haven't agreed to register. This is, I guess, the end of my slides, but there's a lot to know about registration. You can register as a group.
It's time.
And just one more thing, there's a small claims forum for copyright claims where you can bring a claim for up to $15,000, up to $30,000 actually, without a lawyer. So that's also something really, really useful to know about so you can protect yourself. And if you want to know more, I gave this whole talk on LTV. You can watch the recording and you can ask questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. That was so informative.
You want to sit here?
And we will take questions after. And I would like to take this time to introduce Renée Vara. She is a court expert and artist advocate for creative rights with 30 years as a certified appraiser, advisor, and educator to manage collections for foundations, studios, and private collectors. Her firm provides advice and expertise to top 200 collectors and artist studios. Renée will present ways artists can manage their studios, which I really need. My studio is a mess. Art and consignments, along with tips for pricing, insurance, and other business know-how. So let's welcome Renée. Renée.
So welcome. As Joyce mentioned, I have a mixed practice, and I think that's helped me be better at many different things because a lot of issues intersect. So today, some of the things I may be saying sound very basic, but after doing this for 30 years, it's amazing how many very basic things are not done. And that's because artists are busy. You know, they have to balance all of these administrative tasks, working on their art, creating, focus, networking. It's a lot. It's a lot to manage. And most people are kind of mini entrepreneurial, and they don't have the funds or the income to, you know, have an assistant to manage their studio and contact an artist and have a full-time business manager. So what I'm going to try to do is give an overview very quickly of all of the things that often touch an artist in managing their own studios. I do work with very well-established studios as well as emerging artists, and hopefully this helps a bit. Oops. This one.
Let's do it. Hang on, everybody. Try that and then that if it gets.
Okay. So DIY ways to manage your studio. The golden rule often is that good enough is good enough. This is Francis Bacon. I do know people's studio that looks like that, which is totally cool. He was the most incredible, you know, artist and interesting person. So everybody has their different styles and their different ways, but think about things. I think artists oftentimes when they attend talks or they go to educational lectures or they read an article about a very famous artist might have a gallery that's supporting these functions. They might have a personal assistant. They might have a business manager, but you can do many of these things with the kind of philosophy of good enough, because oftentimes where the problems become are not when somebody just tries to meet the low threshold of good enough. It's when people don't do anything at all. So the first thing you can simply do, and I do this kind of once a year, I find different wonderful places, maybe a kind of quiet place that I'm for lunch for 3 hours, strategic plan. You strategic plan for one by one is what I call it, meaning you sit down with yourself and you create goals and a budget. Oftentimes, there are many different things an artist has to try to budget for. You don't have to do them all in 1 year. This year, I'm going to work on my website, or first 6 months, I'm going to work on my website. Second 6 months, I'm going to work on my archive, something like that. And be very fair with yourself, but try to create something with timelines and priorities, right? If you have an upcoming show, obviously there might be a lot of administrative issues you have to deal with, making your work, organizing it, and everything of that sort. We have a joke with all of my friends, form follows funds. So certainly, there's all kinds of limitations we all have to work on. I run a relatively small practice myself. But one thing you can do is create kind of workflows. I think when you're younger and I have a teenager, trying to educate a teenager, you talk about hygiene. And you can create very basic workflows. Maybe it's a simple thing like once a month, I'm going to wrap all the work that I've created that's new and I'm going to store it. On that day, that's when you do it. You mark it off on your calendar, you hold it in your calendar. Maybe on Mondays, I am terrible. I hate billing. I work so hard, but some reason I hate billing. Might be, my corporate life, but I make Monday my billing day and my administrative day. So the other days I could network, lecture, teach, write, all of those things. So create a budget, long-term and short-term projects. Everybody has their limitations. This guy? Yeah. Okay, artist website. The artist website is the new portfolio. Do not bother with portfolios. Some people are very upset when I say that, but I can tell you, working with every level of dealer at every point in the globe, and every collector you can imagine, this is the most accessible way to document your work, communicate your work, and share your work for opportunities. Use a clear URL. Some people, I work with a lot of graffiti and street artists. They're very interesting. They use very unique wild styles, but nobody can find them sometimes except their inner circle. Remember, it's a communication tool. It's not, you can make it however you wish. Look at Cindy Sherman's. This is her gig. Everybody can fashion it in the style they wish. And think about it. It's a place you can kind of control your interpretation a bit, but also give access to your work for curators. And the first thing somebody's going to ask you when you meet them typically is, where's your Instagram or what's your website? So, and I also recommend, if you can afford it, get the org, get the net, get the com, get all the dots if you can, and own it. Because it's your name and your identity. You put your resume on there, you put upcoming exhibitions, events, studio contact, use good quality images. Some artists, there's kind of two major types of websites. One, use representative images where they show some paintings or they show some drawings. Others actually, like Gerhard Richter, has the whole inventory all documented. So his website is actually also a catalog raisonné. So you can choose to do that. Again, this might be something you start with your new work and then work back as part of one of your priorities when you strategize. and kind of document your work. But it's really up to you. This is very easy to do. You don't need a fancy website. The Wix and Squarespace do amazing, and they're not very expensive, and there's all kinds of templates. So documenting your work, I'm glad, Carol, you talked about the importance of documenting your work and inventorying it. Yes, there are great advanced software systems you can use. Some are monthly fees online, some are yearly fees, some of them are quite expensive. Some are more oriented like Artbinder to, you know, an active artist, I would say, and also I would say a gallery or a more commercial application, meaning someone who's like a dealer, and you know, they really need certain ways to constantly communicate artwork from multiple artists. But this is, again, good enough. I can tell you, good enough. There's lots of inexpensive alternatives. You can just go onto Word, Google Docs, use a table, or an Excel sheet. The things you should make sure, as Carol suggested, for legal recourse, you always should have the location of the work tracked, an image of the object that you took or someone yourself took. Don't try not to use an image online. So you can say that as a physical documentation of the object itself. And what I call, or what's traditionally called in the cataloging world, object ID, meaning, you know, how many inches is it signed, front, back, everything of that sort. Okay. Storage. You may have a mixture of storage. Your closet, under your bed, you know, in your studio, your home, and then you might also have work on loan. And that could be on loan to a gallery, a curator, a museum. But it's really important when it's in storage to just take basic precautions. I cannot tell you what I have seen in what condition, where I've seen Warhols stuck on the bottom of a closet with dirty socks on it that was $5 million. You know, so everything you do, label, document, organize. Sounds really basic. Renee, why are you even saying that? I don't know why I'm saying it, but I can promise you it doesn't happen. And then try one kind of efficiency tip is handle every object just once, because I'm sure you're trying to make work. You have lots of work. This is a storage facility of somebody's private collection. They have, you know, 500 works in the collection. So you can see how complicated it can get. But I know a lot of artists that are very, very prolific. I mean, they might make a drawing a day. So handle every work, every object just once. If you're going to wrap it, store it, create an inventory workflow. Again, Monday's first day of the month is going to be the day I inventory everything and I wrap it and I store it. Storage basics to protect against environmental stress. I have seen so many collections damaged by long-term dirt, dust, light, humidity. Out in the Hamptons, the light is just brutal. I just realized my library has been, all my books have been basically damaged by the light. So acid-free wrapping. Bubble wrap is not necessarily your friend, especially if you're putting the bubbles on the paint for 1 foot above the floor, rack, stores, bins. You don't have to get fancy. You just have to try to do it consistently and always have the labels on the outside. Insurance basics. This is a whole topic unto itself. If I have any friends from my insurance world, they might say, oh, that's not right. It's a very technical thing, but here's the basics. And my takeaway with this is get advice, have a policy annual review, and you should do that with someone who's a specialist art insurance broker or underwriter, because they're the ones that are the source. And most brokers or insurance representatives actually don't know about artist studios, artist practices, and it's really important. There's basically 2 ways to insure your art. One as a private collection and one as a professional artist. The private collection insurance does not cover professional artist work. So if you are a working artist, which I know many, they have their own collection and some of their own pieces in their own collection that they're never going to sell. And then they have their artwork that they make income. If you make income from artwork and you have a private collector's insurance policy, it's probably not going to be covered. So you have to think really mindfully about that. Know what you're buying. This is where the insurance broker comes in. The coverages, is it flood, fire? Is it covered when it's on consignment, meaning when it's out of your care and custody? The valuation clauses can get very, very complicated. Is it a stated value or fair market value? Is it market value or only cover cost? Many artist policies cover 50% of the gallery or asking price. So this is where the inventories and your price lists and keeping all this data is really, really important. And then consignments and loans, as Carol has already talked about, when it means basically your work is under somebody else's care and custody, it might mean, which I skipped, that there's wall-to-wall coverage for the insurance. So wall-to-wall coverage basically means from the time it leaves your wall to the time it goes to a museum wall, who's responsible versus the return. And everybody thinks, oh, well, I'm an artist, or, oh, well, I'm a small collector. Those things don't happen at the best museums. I can tell you, it's astounding what happens from the best museums. I have seen $8 million works fall off the wall within a couple of hours. So things happen. Things happen. That's why you have insurance. So it's really important to document those things. And we'll talk more about that. Consignment or loan agreements. Thank you for covering all that. Right? So a consignment is a gallery for sale or a museum loan. And those are two different kinds of agreements. Check the valuation insurance terms, as Carol mentioned. Who's responsible for insurance and what are those insurance limits? Really, really important. Dates of a consignment have to be clearly articulated. Proper credits. How is your name supposed to appear on what marketing, what approval rights you have? Sales commissions, very clearly. What do they get? What do you get? What are they responsible for paying? What are you responsible for paying? And payment and reporting terms. And I'll talk more about that. But again, as Carol discussed, knowing if they're supposed to pay you within 30 days of a sale, you have to kind of keep track of that and remind them. Dealers are very, very busy. They're running around, they're traveling suitcase, salespeople going to all the fairs. They may have multiple galleries. Right now, I can tell you, it's a tough time in the art world. A lot of people are overstretched. Fairs have become very expensive and they're very time consuming. So just keep track of your own work because you never know what will happen. Consignment terms can vary, as Carol was talking about, between when you're a represented artist by a gallery versus a gallery is consigning a single work for a group show. So just be mindful of that. And then again, create a quick workflow. Make a rule to yourself. Every consignment or loan has an agreement. I must have a piece of paper in my computer, in my folder, wherever you do it. I know lots of people love paper. Find a file. It must happen. Document with images. That means when it's about to go out for transport to the gallery or the museum, if you're loaning it, you take an image of it. This is like a registrarial kind of function, but a simple image will change your life. So you can state what the condition is when the time, they picked it up. And then when it returns, open it up, examining and document it. Insurance, the responsibility could be either to the artist or to the gallery. Usually with the museums will pick it up, but you should be careful to look for what value is declared on those museum loans, and then what you're insured for, because many museums have limited insurance policies in terms of what they pay for consignments. So it really depends on the museums. Again, the last thing I want to say is kind of dovetails what Carol said, and that's recognition and reputation. Remember, Anyone who is showing your work or a museum is responsible for augmenting and caring for your recognition and your reputation. They should be very respectful. Everybody I know kind of gives up their life for artists and artworks, but not everybody's so kind. So, you know, this is about the due diligence. Sometimes you can't know who you're working with until you start working with them. I know lots of dealers that at one time were, you know, the it dealer, the it gal, and but on the other side, lots of other ugly things are happening. Am I okay on time? Okay. Commission structures and pricing your work. Carol touched on this, very helpful. Pricing your work, what I would say is be consistent. And then there's two ways to sell your work that we generally call it. Do you have an agent for sale or a direct sale? Direct sale is something you do out of your studio with nobody basically representing you. An agent is going to be a gallery, for instance. As Carol mentioned, a standard kind of operating number is 50% to 50%, meaning the dealer gets 50, you get 50. I would suggest that you agree on discounts to offer ahead of time. Usually, a lot of dealers don't put this in their agreements, but I would suggest, you know, it's okay to typically standard discounts are 10 to 15%. Sometimes when it's going to a great museum or there is a major curator, a major collection, there might be more flexibility. I've curated many shows. All you can do is ask for them to call you and get your permission if they're going to give a higher discount than the standard. Again, this is about your relationship, but sometimes you don't know what you're getting into until you start working with somebody. And think about the material and labor that's put in there, but obviously in the world of conceptual art, these are not necessarily instructive in terms of, you know, your sales price and your market. But certainly if you're a bronze sculptor and you have a lot of materials, and one of the ways to think about what's reasonable when if you're emerging art, you don't have an established marketplace, is to look at other artists that might be at a similar level in the career and what galleries are asking for them. Other gallery places, one of the things is curators would be more of a direct sale. They are agents, but there's a lot of people that are kind of working, all mushing between curator, decorator, advisor. It's really important to understand the kind of role that they're working, to me, and how they're going to interface with you. But in general, a lot of curators only take 30% of the asking price because they don't have a gallery. A decorator and advisor, I'm a big fan of client commission. Decorators are getting paid and have an agreement with their clients. And I'm going to kind of go forward, but on the next slide, but they really should be quite transparent about that. And we'll talk about that. Advisor is the same situation. Let me see. Here we go. So an advisor should be a transparent sale. I work as an advisor all the time. People know what the actual price was offered to me. They know the discounts. I get paid by, these are best practices, right? This is like our Appraisers Association of America, but also the Art Advisors Association of America. You know, basically it should be a very transparent sale. And this is where you can help that process. Don't change the numbers of your artwork. If your artwork sells for $10,000 and that's the asking price at a gallery and an advisor asks for a discount, show the discount. The sales price is $10,000. The advisor discount is 10%. Here's the total amount plus sales tax. Remember sales tax. They pay for sales tax, not you. Right? Decorator and markups, no markups. I know lots of scenarios. Okay. I know lots of scenarios where architects or decorators contract something and then they mark it up and then they get a fee. I am really not okay with that. I think that's really unethical unless they have explained it to you. So have a really good conversation. And again, remember, architects get usually 15–20% of project fees and decorators do as well. So it's not that they're not being compensated. So you can have a really kind, open discussion, but no double dipping. Advisors, decorators, architects, taking a discount from you and then also getting paid, and that not being really to me, that's not really cool. Like, we can all be transparent and everybody can win. Flipping, that's when I talk about markups where they buy it theoretically and then they resell it, but they don't tell you that. And the way you can kind of manage that a bit is you can ask to invoice them in on a studio letterhead where everything is clearly articulated, the date of sale is documented, and also know your customer, KYC. Know who you're selling it to. If they're representing a collector, why can't you know who bought it? It's really important for you, because I can tell you lots of advisors go out of a business, but the provenance of the work and you knowing where those works are, if you have a museum show for 15 years from now, it's great to know. This is part of your legacy, and it's a fair question to ask. And discounts itemized, as I spoke before. Meaning, make sure you put the price plus advisor discount or collector discount or VIP discount or museum discount. That way, if there is an insurance claim and you have to show backup documentation that your artwork is sales price of $10,000, you have that documentation of his sales and an invoice. Commission agreements are specific. Make sure you have the number of mock-ups included, concrete approval processes, changes, meaning if they ask you to change something, they're subject to fees, a cancellation fees, so many commissions, they go bad. I manage many, and I love commissions, but I'm very, very judicious, step by step, making sure a client really likes something before it's installed in their home, or the artist makes it, because it could be quite expensive to deliver it and everything. Also, full payment before delivery. You are never going to deliver or install anything until it's paid or after it's paid. Now, if it's somebody you've been working with, that's a different situation, but we're talking about a new client. Shipping and install responsibilities, typically it's the client. Okay, tracking consignments, we talked about this a bit. What I will say is create email trails. This is another habit. And you might have a call from a gallery. We sold this, blah, blah, blah. We sold it for $15,000. We gave them a 10% discount. Get on your computer or your iPhone and say, hi, thanks so much. I'm so excited. You sold my work today for $15,000 with a 15% discount. I'm looking forward to this. This is really exciting. Thank you so much. Because dealers really do work hard for their artists. They give their whole life up for artists that are good dealers. So it does not have to be, kind of combative or problematic. You're not undermining the process. You're just doing that to remember yourself and to remind them, and also to have an email tracking. Inventory management is part of your inventory process. We have object numbers. You're going to track consignment dates. And as we said, workflows, set alerts. Are you supposed to get paid today? Set alerts. Proof of sales. I think it's fair, Carol, to ask for a copy of the gallery's invoice. Like I said, this helps you in so many ways. It's not just about questioning the dealer, because you're not questioning the dealer. It's documenting your collection. It's documenting your legacy. It's documenting the owners of your work, and it's documenting your proof of your marketplace. Also, check the math. People make lots of mistakes. Okay, how are we doing time?
Well, 5 more minutes to 30 minutes.
Okay.
But you could go over.
Okay. Let's see, after the sale or loan, again, a sale is usually the shipping and the transport is typically the buyer's responsibility. It's if the dealer wants to pay for that, that's all good. It's usually not your responsibility. Sometimes artists will deliver things because, and we have done that as curators, where we really wanted to meet the client, and it was a great opportunity because it's really fun to meet collectors, and collectors love to meet you. So if that's the case and you decide you want to do it, or you have time or the resources, or they ask you to do it, it's up to you. So it may be agreed, but oftentimes the gallery, especially with fairs, is going to be shipping these out. Advisors manage that if there is an advisor on the other side of the sale, and the collector is paying for that. Again, the invoice is going to have clear language saying, shipping is the responsibility of the buyer. And with museum loans, you do, as I said, always want to document the shipment before it leaves your studio and once it returns. And shipping sometimes is included with the museum loans. It really depends on the museum. You can make a strategic decision there. If you're a large outdoor sculptor, you're going to have to deliver it. So you might not have the budget, or the museum might not have the budget to install it, and maybe you want to be there during installation because it's really important to consider its relationship to the architecture or the landscape, and you can ask for that to be reimbursed for sure. Again, having these conversations, touching all these points. Social media, it's marketing 101. I really do not like social media. I am a very social peace person, but it's not for me. But I know a lot of artists really hate it, but it's really there. It's there, and it's important to validate or discover you. There's two ways to approach it, meaning, do you have a social media presence, or are you just documenting your art? Galleries, curators, and collectors, artists do get discovered now. They really, really do. From Instagram, even with the top galleries, it's really revolutionized how artists get selected. It's not the only way, but it could be one way. It also cultivates direct sales. And I know lots of artists that sell directly on Instagram. But one thing I would say, edit, edit, edit. Be very mindful about what it looks like, because that's the image that most people see. And think about the stories versus the post. And Facebook and Twitter, I know many people have very interesting opinions. I'm an advocate in many areas and an activist, but be mindful. You might have done something when you were 12, or I don't know, at this point, maybe 20. Sometimes maybe have a little footprint audit, I call it. And then I might have to stop, but I do want to discuss AI. AI is definitely a threat to your copyright and your style. It's real, it's moving fast. It has a huge impact on your reproduction rights. Some artists, as Carol said, are not interested in reproduction rights, but nevertheless, a mimicry of your style can be really, really disconcerting. Sarah Anderson is an example of a comic and an illustrator who took her years to kind of establish her own visual voice, and everything has a lot of personal meaning in her characters. And she was basically co-opted by like all these alt-right political activists. And if you're interested in it, I would recommend you read her New York Times article. It's really astounding. Some artists, one thing you can try to stay calm about is that most artists are selling objects, not images, but nevertheless, there's ways to fight back. One, you can opt out. They're not options for everything. If you are in different social media accounts or blogs or whatever, there might be opt-out options. Can you make the accounts private? I've seen this on a lot of artist-to-artist educational forums. I do not think it's a good idea to make your Instagram account private. That's a personal choice. I don't know how somebody's going to discover you if everything's private, and it possibly impacts your SEO search. So I'm not sure of that. There is a new alternative social media channel called Kara. We'll see how that works out, and it's anti-AI, and therefore nothing is on there that is created by AI and is allowed. Some artists really like it. They say it's a network. Some people think it's too niche and it's going to limit artists. That's your choice. You might want to do both. I don't know. Remember, your website images are subject to the AI that gobbles. Here's a second thing that's really amazing that you can do right now to help yourself, because the regulatory and legal response to all of this is just simply too slow, and AI is moving way too fast. So here's a simple thing. It's amazing. It was created and invented by a professor of University of Chicago and his PhD student, Ben Zhao and Sean Shan, which both, I think, won the MIT Innovators Award of the Year last year or 2 years ago. And to me, this is heroic because they created two tools. One is called Glaze, which is basically a program that scrambles. If you look on the right, it scrambles the pixel imagery. So when the AI reads it, it scrambles it so it can't pick up those things like in the image on the left, you can see the cross hatching. It scrambles it so it changes it. That's like 1.0. Then there's a 2.0, which they created, which is called Nightshade, which is really interesting. This is all free, offered to artists. That's why they're really amazing people. Shout out to them. Nightshade works similarly, kind of like a filter, but what it does is it creates a poison pill. And the poison pill becomes more poisonous as more people use it. So it's open source. As AI develop, it can be tweaked and also developed. And as you can see, it kind of gives you a scale. Like, look at the handbag. AI would read the handbag, but then after 300 poison samples, the handbag becomes a toaster. So it basically fakes it. Glaze kind of changes the way it mimics your style, but Nightshade creates an alternative message that confuses it. It's pretty incredible. So last thing I want to say is art ecosystem. This is my big student slide. It's like a sloppy hamburger. Everybody's in there between the bun and the top and the bottom of the bun, right? When I started this, artists didn't have a lot of rights. And that was the beginning of VARA, the Visual Artists' Rights Act, where it was really hard to fight back as an artist. Copyright wasn't as developed and there wasn't as many, I would say, well, VARA was 1991, right?
Right, the copyright's always has been around since this.
But I think the access to the resources wasn't as easy as it is now with YouTube and public educational. I also think there's a lot more artist advocates and the recourse, meaning the process to go through copyright might be the same. But what I'm talking about is also addressing like the larger power structures that existed when I started. You know, there really was like dealers are the powerful, collectors are the all powerful. I think that's really changed where artists are the talent now. It's kind of like a little bit more like Hollywood. And so I think that's created a much better balance in the relationships. We're all stuck in the middle. My insurance friends get mad that they're the ketchup. But the dealers and the galleries of the pickle, they add a little spice, meaning, you know, that has changed. And certainly these rights allow you, especially the visual artist rights, because I was involved with the 5 Points case, and now it has some legal precedence for it. But always be mindful, because oftentimes before going to court, you can work these things out with negotiations, with conversations, maybe arbitration. You know, sometimes going to court, if you can't use the small claims court, can be very expensive and arduous and very exhausting to your practice. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. And that was so much food for thought. And I really appreciate that you said, like, it's good enough, like, just do one thing at a time. So what I'd like to do now is invite people to put questions in the chat, and I will read them, and we will have our two experts here answer the questions. So can you scoot together? Okay, good.
Like camp.
We're
Early
all
camp,
get
yay.
together in my dining room. Will you have another one of these about protecting ourselves from AI theft? Renee covered that a little bit. And maybe in the
Okay.
future, we'll get someone just to focus on that because that is a big topic.
Well, there are a lot of lawsuits pending where artists of all kinds are suing, but it's very slow. I mean, there was one decision. I mean, there are two issues. Like, is the use of your images for training copyright infringement or is it fair use? And that's why I say always no copyright, because the principles that have existed for a long, long time apply to AI. There's one case where they say it is not fair use, but that doesn't apply to generative AI. The cases are moving slowly, but it's important to know about them. And copyright registration, I keep preaching about it, but one artist was part of a very big case and she was thrown out of the case because she had not registered copyright. It's a terrible rule. It's ridiculous, but it's the law. So there is a lot that can be said, and I think these tools are really great. So that's something that could happen. There's a lot to say.
And I just want to add, they're very user friendly. It's basically uploading your file. It's like a slow filter. You upload your file, it processes it, it downloads it. Some people want to use watermarks, but the watermarks I have seen, meaning from their own studio, can be very disruptive. You know, the artwork that's on your website should be the best images you can create, because that's how people are going to find you. Same thing with Instagram.
This is really, really helpful. Thank you. I have a question about copyright. Now, my understanding was that as soon as you create an image, you own the copyright. So can you tell us now, wouldn't that, if you had documentation that this image was created in 1999, because you had proof of that, why wouldn't that be sustainable?
It's a great question. Okay. Yes, as soon as you create original work in tangible form, you own the copyright. You have exclusive rights to adapt, to copy, to distribute, to perform, etc. All the rights. Unfortunately, there's a law, which is terrible. And there was an advocacy effort in the early 90s to get rid of it, but the artists didn't advocate enough, and all the companies defeated it, that it's not meaningfully enforceable until you register it. The Supreme Court, unfortunately, said in order to go to court, you have to have a copyright registration. And the reality of registration is, let's say there's a wonderful painter who she makes a decent living as a painter. She's really fantastic, and she sees her work copied in terrible format. She sues the people who are showing her work, and let's say she has to prove actual damages. Well, how does she prove her actual damages? She's a painter. Is she losing sales because, and how does she prove like how much they sold it for maybe $100? They sell a copy of a $10,000 painting. It's very expensive to do that. Because of that, this is a good part of the law, that if you've registered your copyright, the court has the authority to issue what they call statutory damages, which are large damages. So it is like, I call it artist liability insurance, because as stupid as a law as it is, it gives you the ability to get a lot of money if your work is copied. So I know people say, and then, certain art dealers say, well, what artist is going to do that? I understand it's a pain in the neck. It's not that hard, except that the government office who administers it doesn't make it as easy as it could for you. But it means that if something happens, you have the ability. And I'm working on a settlement right now where the artist is getting a decent amount of money because she registered her copyright, because they know if she goes to court, they can get large damages. Now, there's a small claims copyright now where you can register as soon as you file. You can file and you can register at the same time. So that's a great question, and it's one of these things in law that makes no sense, but it's the law.
So can I add to that? So one way you can manage, because it's a lot of work. So a work is going to a gallery, or a work is going to a museum, or your work, you're going to put this work on Instagram, right? That's the work you copyright.
Exactly.
Right? You try to
Exactly.
prioritize. Maybe there's work you have from 20 years ago that you don't even want to show, and you never copyrighted. Don't focus on that.
Right.
Try to, again, prioritize, because you can be
Absolutely.
very strategic about how you basically spend your efforts. The second thing I want to say is this is where AI is really insidious, because the mimicry piece, if anybody has used ChatGPT, you could put it in there and somebody can create an image of themselves in your style. So once you have codified a style and may become iconic and recognizable, it can then be stolen from you.
Right.
And this is like, this is kind of antithetical to what every artist tries to achieve.
Right.
But because it's in the style of, it's not necessarily
It's
protected.
right.
not
And
copyrighted.
what I say to, I mean, just in my class before I came, the head of the Graphic Artists Guild spoke to my students. There are organizations you should belong to that are advocacy organizations
Yes.
that fight for these things. Like even if you're not a graphic artist, it's about copyright.
Right.
And they helped get this small claims board passed. Join something, and we need a good organization for visual artists. I mean, there's the Artist Rights Society, which is very good, but we need more. Until we have it, join something that will keep you abreast of all this stuff. The Copyright Alliance is a fabulous one. You can join, you don't have to even pay. You can get an AI alerts, so you can sign up for AI alerts, so they send you, and they have tapes and little videos that explain all this stuff, because legal stuff is a lot. It's like makes your head hurt, and you might think, oh, it's too much. But you can take it in little steps, and you can learn a lot.
I mean, there's an onslaught of even my profession with AI, right? So we're all kind of looking this down the road, but just do what you can do now.
Yeah.
Right? And hopefully things will, I don't know, sort itself out. I don't know. I'm optimistic, but you certainly can protect yourself. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
She said today, I love this idea, like if Spotify is a legal way for musicians to get paid, even though it may not be so good. There should be a Spotify for artists, but there isn't. So if maybe somebody needs to create one, but there are lots of licensing programs out there for AI, but you just have to, stay abreast of, like, keep one part of your brain open to this stuff. Like Renee said, maybe on Monday you say, okay, I'm going to catch up with the New York Times and what's going on in AI. I think that's I love that idea.
But don't let it scare you. I know a lot of artists who are just like, I'm not showing anything. I'm not putting on anything on my website. I'm not using Instagram. I really think that everybody has their own practice. Everybody can deal with things. But the old days of the dealer is the dealer who promotes my art and sells my art, and I'm the artist and I'm in the studio. Those days are way gone. And so why limit yourself? Just take some precautions.
Right.
Yeah, and it is true. We had one artist who was discovered with the Pollock Krasner house from Instagram,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
she had a residency in the de Kooning house. So yes, it is true. So let's see some questions now. And thank you. This is definitely very helpful. And I'm always keeping in mind, don't go by what your art is worth now. Always think about what it could be in the future.
Oh, also, I wanted to say there's a lot of YouTube educational forums. There's a lot of Instagram. The number of followers does not make you an expert, especially when it comes to copyright issues, legal issues. So know the source that you're trusting. I've heard some really
Right.
crazy advice out there, and it's not only detrimental to your career, it's kind of counter to the way the art world works if you're trying to augment your reputation and your marketplace. So make sure that you don't get caught up in the world because the art world is a niche world. It does run by its own rules. Unfortunately, like Hollywood or other smaller worlds, it has a certain kind of behaviors and, values. They might not be good, but
Yeah.
you should be aware of them, and just don't follow somebody or listen to somebody unless you know that they're a very reputable person. So I always say number of followers does not equal expertise.
That is a very, very good point. When I was at the Museum of Modern Art and I was writing these books, and I was young and getting advice and copyright and all that, and someone told me, you wouldn't go like to a layman if you wanted your teeth fixed. You'd
Right.
go to a dentist. So that's where you go, and if you need a lawyer, you get a lawyer, right? If you
And
don't
there's
understand.
copyright.gov, the Copyright Office.
True.
Copyright.gov. They have tons of videos and fact sheets that
Very
explain
true.
copyright.
And they're very easy
And-
to understand.
Yeah, and they're written
Very.
for I mean, there's legal stuff too if you want it, but there's lots and lots of stuff, and that's where you go.
That
Or the
is-
Copyright Alliance.
Right.
That's where you go.
There's also, New York lawyers, right?
For the arts.
For
Well,
the
there's
arts.
volunteer lawyers for the
Yes,
arts,
that's right.
definitely. They have programs all the
There's
time.
all these other, so like, look at good organizations because they vet people. So Creative Capital is an example, your local museum, your regional museum. Look for good educational. There's a whole new world of people who are promising like to get you grants, who ask artists to pay all this money to promote them, and they're going to shape your career as a counselor. I'm very weary of them. I know some of them, and I know there are many, many more out there. Just be very wary of that, especially curators who you pay to get shows.
So in the chat, there was a question about how to contact the state for copyright, but US copyright is federal, correct?
All that matters is US copyright. The
Mhm.
state, it's federal law. I mean, there are laws in other countries, but the state doesn't administer copyright. It's just the US government, copyright.gov. That's it. And if you want additional information, Copyright Alliance is really, really helpful. So don't even worry about the state because they don't have there's nothing in the state that governs copyright.
Thank you. Let's see. Hi Isabella says, if having studio visitors and possibly classes at home studio, how do you ensure? Many homeowner policies will not accept this. Mine is saying, I'll need business insurance. That's a little different than insuring the object, but any
I
thoughts
think,
on that?
yeah, that's a very good question, actually. Yeah, I mean, if you're making money for those studio visits and it's part of your practice or you're doing classes, yeah, small business insurance, and you might be able to get that under an artist policy where it combines those two things. This is where you need a specialty art insurance broker because they know the policies, they know what's out in the marketplace, and they can give you very specific advice. Where you have a consultation with them, you tell them what you need, and they will sort through it for you.
Also, as an educator myself, doing programs even on Zoom or various locations like the Pollock Krasner House, and I visit schools, I have specialty insurance is what it's called. And I have it just for myself. I used to have it for myself and my instructors. But what I came to understand is that even if the place I'm teaching, they have insurance, like if I'm in a school, I could still get sued as a teacher. So a lot of school teachers have their own insurance.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the art object itself. Like I know someone, he sold the artwork and then it got destroyed when it was hung up on the wall, and he's being sued because he was the one that paid for the handling of the artwork, and he wasn't properly insured.
And it's usually the legal fees that can be messy
Yeah.
sometimes in those cases. So, it's called a BOP policy, may be necessary, but maybe if you're making money also from your artwork and you need to ensure that, an agent can give you advice on a coverage or a policy that covers both. This is what they do every day. And a lot of the best insurance brokers for fine art work with, all the top museums and galleries, but they also are really, really accommodating to artists to help them.
But very good question, Isabella. Is there short-term liability and property insurance for artists doing the occasional art fair or pop-up?
Good question. So I've done lots of independent curating. Sometimes I've done very, very large shows, and again, get to, an art insurance entertainment broker. In that instance, I had, we had 30 rooms, huge party with the Warhol Museum with 2,000 of my best friends. We needed event insurance on top of everything else. And the dealers had their own insurance. And yes, you might be liable for the grounds. Absolutely. And something that happens there. Yeah.
Thank you. Good question.
And
Well-
it's called event insurance rather than, yeah, I mean, generally, go ahead.
Okay.
Very good question. Han Chin is an artist who just had a show at the Pollock Krasner House. And she says, how to register copyright? Will it be practical since the artist has thousands of works?
Okay, as Renee said, if you're gonna have a show, register those. There are ways to do group registrations, and they need more, and I'm part of advocating that there needs to be more, but there are already ways you can register as a group. Like one way is you could do 10 unpublished works. Published is a term of art that could make your head hurt, but basically, if it's not published unless it's offered for sale. If you show 10 works at the Pollock Krasner House, but they're not for sale, that's not a publication. Publication is defined as when you give your work to somebody and it's available for sale. So you could take 10 of works that haven't been put out there yet, and you could register those. If you're a photographer, you can do lots more, but there are ways to do group registrations. There needs to be many, many more. I mean, the Register of Copyright, who's in charge of it, gives an annual talk. And I went to that talk by Zoom and I asked specifically, what about fine artists? They need a group registration, and they say, well, we've heard this, we're working on it. We need it. We have to keep pushing for it. There needs to be advocacy for it because everyone says the same thing. How am I going to register all my work? You don't have to, but register the works that matter.
I have a question on that. If I have 10, I sell my social justice posters. They're for sale. Can I put them together like in a booklet?
Well, actually, if you're doing commercial art, you can, there's a proposal now for doing a whole lot of commercial, like maybe 100 images that you do within 30 days on one group registration. But you could try to be as creative as you can and put them in one thing. Don't lie, because if you get caught, you're
No, I'm just kidding around.
People tend to.
Can I be a little bit of the questioner here?
Sure.
So, because I think some other people also might have the same question. So if you register it as one portfolio, is it only statutory damages for one incident?
No, if they register, for one incident,
So
no.
I'm saying if the portfolio has 10 objects.
Yeah,
And you have one registration for the
Right.
copyright of the 10 objects as a portfolio of 10, can you get one statutory damage claim amount
No.
or 10?
there's no limit
Okay,
of the statutory. You can get as many claims as there are infringements.
right.
But if they register, I'm not sure, I don't know if they would register a portfolio. I don't know. I mean, if they're unpublished.
Think about like Warhol,
It-
Endangered Series, right?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I would try. I'm not sure if they
Okay.
would, but clearly if they're not offered for sale yet, you can. So, but if they register as a group, then each one has protection.
Right. So the Visual Artists' Rights Act, I just want to throw in there because that is another very long topic and talk. There's been, a lot of artists are interested in it because of the 5 Points case, which was, pretty astounding and a legal precedent. But one thing that's different that everybody has to keep in mind is there is a threshold in VARA, which there isn't in copyright.
Right.
And that's what I often attest to. It's called recognized stature. So it means you don't qualify for damages unless you meet a threshold of recognized stature.
Exactly.
So it's a very different procedure. And, it sounds all sexy, but it's a very kind of esoteric, complicated law. And, but the 5 Points case is really incredible. So I just wanted to say that.
The 5 Points case is the best example I know of artists standing up for their rights
Collective bargaining.
and they
Yeah.
won. And of course, they had Renee as an expert witness, which helped a lot. But they won. They each got $150,000. They got statutory damages. And so it's really important. And recognized stature only applies to the works that are destroyed. And what happened in this case and in earlier cases, it doesn't have to just be an art expert who says it's
Right.
recognized. It could be a community, like we
Right,
love
there's 3 different standards, but as you know, the community standard hasn't
yeah.
been standing up.
Yeah, but I thought,
Unfortunately,
maybe,
yes.
I mean, if people are interested, it's really interesting.
It's very interesting, you know, that could be another lecture or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I give that lecture a lot, but
Oh.
it is very complicated, and the law is changing, you know, as more and more cases. But remember, it's very expensive legally to proceed with these cases. The maximum statutory damage is $150,000.
But if you've registered, the court can award attorney's fees. It's not guaranteed,
That's another
but the
thing.
court can. And
That's
so
right.
let's say you have a show coming up with 10 works that you love, and you've registered, and somebody copies them, and you really want to bring a case. If you have registered, the court can award your attorney's fees. And a lawyer may take your case saying, you can pay me later because I will only get paid if I get attorney. And it's much
Yes.
easier to get a lawyer that way than just to
Yes.
have to pay legal fees, which just can be so
But
much for.
Contingency cases, I mean, I've seen artists like get a very small amount. But as you
You can't
said,
count on
you
it.
can't count on it, and you don't know how the judge will rule, and you don't know until it's over.
I know.
And you've invested 3 or 5 years maybe in this, and you spent thousands of dollars, because if you get an expert, I mean, I do like an artist rate all the time, or I do it for free, but it's enormously
Yeah.
time consuming for everyone.
Yeah.
And also be wary that you hire a lot of, I'm sorry to say this about attorneys, but they think it's very sexy.
Oh, I know.
And they don't have any understanding of the art world or how this applies, and it can get very messy.
It might be useful. I don't know, but how to work with attorneys, because
Yes, very.
legal stuff does take a lot of time, but you need to, if you're really wealthy, it's easy, or if you really have no money, you could qualify for pro bono lawyers possibly,
Sure.
but you're a regular person, it's expensive, and it's important to know how to deal with a lawyer, so you know what you can pay for. Like, I work with people and try to work within what they can afford.
Right.
And there are lots of things you can do yourself. You can you don't need a lawyer to register a copyright.
Right.
You just need some patience.
Right.
You do not need an attorney for that. And attorneys will talk about it and say, you could call me for that. That's crazy. You don't need that. But there are times
That's a
you
good
do.
point.
So it's really important to know how to work with
I
the
actually
profession.
say that to every student all the time. You don't need to know the laws, but you need to know when to call a lawyer.
Absolutely.
That's what you need to know.
Right.
100%.
We're talking
When
a
I
lot.
was
Are there more
starting,
questions?
well, we're going to wrap up now, but it is so true. And it is also so true. I remember when I was working at the Museum of Modern Art, and I needed a lawyer, and it was really expensive. And I used to get on the phone and be like, excuse me, are you charging me for this? Like,
Oh,
I was like,
sure.
don't be proud, because you're going to
Yeah.
wind up with a $10,000 bill. But I'm so grateful I hired that attorney, because I got my name on my book and it launched my career. And
Wow.
so on that note, if somebody needs a lawyer and they want to contact you, Carol Steinberg, how do they do that?
Put my
I'm going to put it in the chat right now to everyone. And we're going to put other resources available as well. So what is it?
you could do, here's my phone. You could text me or email me.
Text. Well, which is better? I'm going to type it right in.
Email.
What is it?
It's Elizabeth CJS at Gmail.
Elizabeth CJS
at
at
Gmail.
oop, sorry, everybody, at Gmail. Okay, at gmail.com. And Renee, how would somebody contact you?
Just
if they need
Vara
art?
Art, VARA, like the law.
They named it after you.
No.
I'm kidding.
VaraArt.com
Yep, .com.
is your website?
Yep.
Okay, and you'll find
there's a
everything.
contact.
Someone else had a question about the last this was the 2-part program. And if you'd like to see the recording from the first program called Financial Fitness for Artists, which I gave, that will be edited and it will be on our social media. You can email me at joyce@imaginearted.com and I will send you the link, okay? and also to this one as well. Okay? So I'm sorry we're not going to get to everybody's questions, but I hope that this makes you want to learn more. And like Carol and Renee said, there's many resources available. And I love what Renee said about set aside that time, because it can be a little overwhelming, but it is a very good tip to say, Monday, I'm going to do this from 3 to 5 on, that's my art business day. I'm going to research copyright, or I'm going to research whatever it is you want to research.
It's like
Okay?
doing your laundry. I mean, you might not like to do it, but you got to
Feel
do
good
it.
once it's done.
I happen to love laundry, but because it gets done and it's done, it makes me feel like I accomplished something. Anyway, everybody, thank
Thanks
you
for
so
coming.
much. And
Thank you very
Pollock
much.
Krasner House
for
and
you.
Study Center and our director, Matthew Ward. We will be back on track, open in May. So come visit pkhouse.org. Okay, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna stop and thank you to our wonderful speakers, Carol and Renee.
Thank you.